Hello and welcome to Hump Day. We certainly pleased to have you with us today, and it has been quite a day, quite a day, quite a day. I apologize because last week I told you we were going to have Councilwoman Paula McCraney as a guest on our show. That didn't happen, but if you've been watching the news, you'll know what's going on right here and right now. And so there's things are happening, and there's nothing that we can do about it. But we can still bring you the word. And as you know, our series, God's Glory, My Story, is our theme. And today our lesson is Satan, we're gonna tear your kingdom down. And so after studying this lesson, what we want students to realize is that Satan is busy, and it is our responsibility, not someone else, but it's our responsibility to tear his kingdom down. We must reverse the current. Now, a minister in Chicago told a story about the fact that the Chicago River for years fed into Lake Michigan. And Lake Michigan was also a source of drinking water for the residents of Chicago. So this means when the Chicago River became polluted and consequently much of the drinking water of Lake Michigan became contaminated, and this caused people to get sick. So the city fathers came together and said, now what can we do? And a scientist said, look, the only way you're going to preserve the drinking water in Lake Michigan is you have to somehow reverse the current. Because as long as the current is going in the wrong direction, it's going to carry pollution into your drinking water, and it's going to jack up people's lives. So, do you know when you look at the proliferation of crime, school shootings, violence in our communities, all that is just sewage and contamination that comes from a current. Now, listen to me. And the current is a flow of economic injustice, poverty, and racism. Those things have carried all this sewage into our community. So I just pray that somebody today, tomorrow, would dare to take a stand and say, we've got to reverse the current. We do not have to have all these guns in our community. We do not need guns in our schools. We do not need guns in the hands of our children. Now, I know the NRA, people are saying guns don't kill people. People do. And they right, but it's people with guns who kill people. And I can't figure out why we feel we need all these guns anyway. But we must reverse the current, particularly in the west end of Louisville. It has gotten so until you cannot hardly walk down the street. So we have got to reverse the current. Our lesson today is one of the greatest texts of a mother that is often forgotten in the scripture. Now, if I ask us, what mothers do you think are top dogs, are the tops? Oh, we would say Mary Elizabeth, Rachel, Rebecca, Hannah, Ruth, Naomi. But our lesson today gives us another mother worthy of our examination. Who is she? Rizpah. That's her name. Our text is tragic, and yet out of this tragedy, there is a bright spot because a mama says, I cannot stop you, but I can sure put a hurt on you. So now let us read 2 Samuel 21st chapter, starting at verse 1. During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successful years. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, it is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king, David that is, summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul in his zeal for Israel and Judah had tried to annihilate them. Now let's stop right here. You might want to go back and read Joshua. I think it's chapter 9. When Joshua gets into the promised land, he gets into Canaan after the walls of Jericho come down, after the battle of Ai, 5 kings come up against Joshua. And Joshua defeats them. Now here come a band of ragtag envoy, if you please, to Joshua, wanting to make a covenant with him. Now what they did, and they did it in deception. They put on old clothes. They put dirt on themselves. They put on old shoes. And if the shoes didn't look old enough, then they cut them up. They scratched them up. They did all of this. They got bread, and they let the bread go bad. Then they went to Joshua and said that they had come from a faraway land. They had heard about Joshua, and so they wanted to make a covenant with them. Now, Joshua did not ask God about it. But after he and the men, they talked and they investigated a little bit, just a little bit. They made a covenant before God that they would spare the Gibeonites. Now, 3 days after that, they found out that the Gibeonites were in fact people right there in their land. But because of the stipulation, because of the covenant that they had made before God, they couldn't do anything. And they had to live up to their word. Woo, that's a good one right there. If we just live up to our word. And so, but when Saul became king, he was so ambitious for Judah and Israel that he tried to annihilate them. Now let's go back to verse 3. David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance. The Gibeonites answered him, we have no right. You hear what it said? We have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death. What do you want me to do for you? David asked. They answered the king, as for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us, so that we have been disseminated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed, and their bodies exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one. So the king said, I will give them to you. The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Aiah's daughter Rizpah, whom she had born to Saul, together with 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, whom she had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Maholite. Got the words today. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed them and exposed their bodies on a hill before the Lord. All 7, listen to me now, all 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was beginning. Now, Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock from the beginning of the harvest. Oh, you got to listen to this. From the beginning of the harvest until the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies. She did not let the birds touch them by day, or the wild animals by night. When David was told of Aiah's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Shebash Gilead. They had stolen their bodies from the public square at Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck Saul down on Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zillah in Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. After that, God answered prayer in behalf of the land. Now, let's look at and see what we've just talked about. Bible readers recognize by way of context that we begin this chapter with David inquiring of the Lord as to why there is a famine in the land. And a famine simply means that despite their hard work, they had nothing to show for it. Despite giving their best, life was not giving it back to them. So, now, what do we do now? So here's what they found out. The Lord said to David, the reason there is famine in the land, simple. There's blood on Saul's hands. So David surmises that he had to go kill the remaining relatives of Saul. Now, I want you to understand, by way of cultural context, that whenever a new bloodline assumed the throne, now you done watch The Godfather and all that kind of stuff enough to know that they killed anybody, any relatives that are living. So the first order of business was to kill off all the former king's relatives. So no one from the former king's family could have a claim on the throne. Now, that's what happened. So they go off and they kill. Now, this severe famine, lasting for 3 years, overtook the land of Israel, and David was divinely informed that the famine was in consequence. Actions, choices have consequences. And even though we didn't make the choice, somebody else's choice, you can feel the consequences. And this is what we see in our lesson. Saul had made a choice to try to rid Israel of the Gibeonites. But instead, what he brought upon them was a severe famine that lasted 3 years. Now, David was divinely informed that the family was a consequence of Saul slaughtering the oath-protected Gibeonites. Now, and they demanded by way of compensation that the 7 sons of Saul should be hung up before the Lord. Woo! So it thus came about that innocent children had to bear heavy punishment for the sin of their father. So the 5 sons of Saul by Merab, who was cared for by Michal after her sister's death, and the 2 sons of Rizpah, they were all hung. Now let me say this. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. Thus vengeance, a divine prerogative, was taken out of God's hands and executed by revengeful men in God's name upon 7 innocent men. And they did it in God's name. These men were cruelly slaughtered. And it wasn't done to appease divine wrath, but to satisfy a human thirst for revenge. And history affirms that innocent people suffer for the sins of their rulers. Look at us today, suffering, but we did it to ourselves. We put a ignorant man like Donald Trump in the White House, and all the ignorance that is in America has come to the forefront. Now, notice that David inquired of God. David asked God, why is there a famine in the land? God told him, but he did not ask God, how can I reverse the current? How can I stop the famine? Instead, look at this. He goes to the Gibeonites. So all David does is he is using religion to justify his political, military maneuvering. And my God, we have a lot of that today. The Bible says they go after Saul's family in retaliation. So in other words, it's a retaliation drive-by. And they killed 5 of Saul's grandsons and 2 of Saul's sons, birthed through his concubine, Rizpah. But here's what I love about the Bible lets us know that as soon as that takes place, they leave the dead, the decaying bodies of Rizpah's sons and Saul's grandsons out in the open. But as soon as Sister Girl gets word of what's going on, she, like many black mothers, have said, you ain't gonna do this over my dead body. I mean, you heard your mama tell you that. You do that over my dead body. And they meant it. Do you see the picture? It's a mother crying, hurting, because her sons are dying. How many mothers have we seen crying over their sons because of being killed by the very people who are to protect them? Now consider these 7 young men. They could, it's more than 7, but I pulled up 7 men, young men. I guess I could even say 7 black males, because most of them are not men. They never reached that age. You look at Tamir Rice, he was 12. And according to initial reports, the officer were reported around 11 o'clock, a 911 call came in that several underage kids were drunk, walking around at a party of about 100 people. Now, they come in and they shoot at the car and hit this 12-year-old. Now somebody may say, well, he shouldn't have been out there. It's the fact of the matter is they shot blindly into a car and killed this young child, 12 years old. Then consider one of them was named Jordan Edwards, 15. And Jordan Edwards, no, the Jordan Edwards, I got it wrong. I got it all. When I told you that the police were called and he was shot, he's the one that was killed in the car. Rice was just, he had a toy gun, and somebody saw it, called the police, and they shot him. Damon Grimes, he was 15. He dies after the police shoots him with a taser. Tavon Martin, we know that he was shot down on his way home. And in fact, right now, what we had planned today, and I guess today must have been the day, because I had planned for this lesson. That's why I had invited Metro Councilwoman Paula McCraney, the chief of police, and others, because I wanted to know, how do we reverse the current here in our city? But I was upended. Why? Because the Louisville Metro Police Department and the Louisville Jefferson County Metro government were found. This was announced. If you've been watching television, you've heard this. They're found engaged in the patterns of unconstitutional behavior, routinely using excessive force, conducting searches based on invalid warrants, and unlawful discriminating against black people in enforcing activities. A federal investigation found today. The review conducted by the Justice Department Rights Division, Civil Rights Division, also found that police violated the rights of those engaged in, now listen to me, protected speech critical of policing, and that some officers used racial slurs about black citizens. My sisters and brothers, the very people who are supposed to be looking out for us are the ones who are killing us. And it said the Louisville investigation came in the aftermath of the botched police raid that led to the death of Breonna Taylor in March of 2020, 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And my sisters and brothers, God is calling for justice. Micah 6 and 8. I read it before I came up here. He said, He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of thee? Do justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That's all He asks you to do. Do justly, do right. And just is doing just that. Morally and ethically, what is right. Amos 5 and 24, we are told, but let justice run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And in the case of Tyree Nichols, you cannot even expect, if they look like you, that they are going to take care of you. Because he was beat to death by 5 black policemen. So you can't expect, just because they look like you, that they'll help you out. Well, let me go on. Rispa. She was a victim of vengeance. She was a broken-hearted mother who had been pawned by the powers that be, a woman who had been used and misused as a concubine. You know, she had no rights if she was a concubine. Women didn't have rights anyway. And she discovered, as you have probably discovered, if you haven't, you will, in this world, people will use you and then misuse you or have no use for you at all. People who you do good for will get what they can from you. And then once they get it from you, if you ever need them, they know where to be found. And she was a victim herself. But she was a defender of the dead. We read in verse 10 how Rispa took sackcloth, spread it out for herself on a rock, and from the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from heaven, she did not let the birds of the air touch them by day. Woo! Or the wild animals by night. In other words, through the days and the weeks, she watched their broken bodies decaying, blacken, wither, and begin to stink. But she never relaxed her vigil. She stayed on guard. When the birds came during the day to think they were going to pick on this dead skin, she beat them away. When the animals would come at night, the hyenas, the wolves, whatever, she beat them away. And she did this every day, my sisters and brothers, from April to October. That we had mothers. After you cry, because you got to cry, but we need mothers to lead us in the parade. She didn't have the power to prevent the gruesome murder of her 2 sons, but no one could stay her from the act of mercy in caring for their mingled bodies. There they are. See, number one, anybody in Israel, anybody hung on a tree was not supposed to stay there after dark. They had to be down by a certain time. But as you see in the picture on your screen, this woman had to fight them off. In last week's lesson, we saw Zelophehad's daughters wanted justice, distributive justice, or economic fairness. This week we see that Rispa wants procedural justice, or due process. This due process of fairness is not just to one another, but also emphasizes the treatment of foreigners, widows, and orphans. In other words, people with no legal standing. That's what she wanted, and she was a defender of the dead. She couldn't stop them. She couldn't stop them from killing her. but she could watch over their dead bodies. Oh, do you see this black mother? Yeah, I said she was a black mother because she is. As she stays out there day and night until October. And every time some scavenger tried to come and tear away the flesh of her child, she fights them off. And we have mothers who, by their action, have made us well aware. You look at, I told you last week, I hope you did. If you don't, look at it. The movie Till, and we see Emmett Till's mother. There she is with her son. Nice looking young man. But he doesn't even look human in this casket. And when the family said, no, let's keep the casket closed, she said, no, I want the world to see what they did to my son. It could bring tears to my eyes today to see this fine young man laying up in a coffin looking like something not human. And how long are we going to let this go on? This mother, Rispa, Till's mother, they felt the need to do something. She said, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Then you have Tyree Nichols' mom. She now the latest mom that you see, crying over her son. And when I saw the funeral and what she had to say, it brought me to tears. Because she said, I have to believe that God sent him here for a reason. And that reason he has completed. So God has taken him away. Mothers are crying over their sons. Mothers all over this nation, especially African American mothers, have found themselves in Rispa's position. They find themselves taking on the vultures by day and the jackals by night. And the vultures and jackals today include racism, the drug culture, guns, that destroys anything and everything that gets in the way. The use of crack. Crack can make children turn on their mothers. And African American women give up their children. Something that even slavery couldn't do. But they're doing it. But even we may have to grieve. But let me say this. Now, each day, many of our mothers learn that their children have been harmed in some way, socially, economically, educationally, psychologically, spiritually, or physically. Bullying going on in schools. Put down. Now they fighting because they don't want us to know our history, and they don't want their children to know our history. And yes, like Rispa, we must grieve, but we must pick up our sackcloth and grieve over the situations that now confronts us. The DOJ, their report, it should make us cry to think that in the year 2023 that racism is alive and well, and that the police, the very people who wants our vote, is the main ones who are out to kill us. Oh yeah, we must grieve, but then we've got to face the situation that confront us. And we must keep vigil over the injustice done to our children. They are the first ones to put out of school. They the first ones who are, we have the highest average there is of being sent home. Oh yeah, in this fight, some will die, but we must keep pressing for justice and honor. And through the prayers of mothers, through the vigils of mothers, through the fights of mothers, others can be saved and our land healed. And so we've got this song. We named the lesson, Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down. This is the old song. Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down. You've been building your kingdom all over the land. But Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down. How? The mothers are going to pray your kingdom down. You hear me, Satan? The mothers are going to pray your kingdom down. You've been building your kingdom all over the land. Shirley Caesar even said, you've been building your kingdom all in the house of God. But Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down. That's our lesson for today. Next week, we will talk about damaged goods. God's glory, my story. If you want to become a part of the St. Stephen Fellowship, you can do so just by emailing to newstart@ssclive.org and let us know that you want to join the fellowship. Or you can call us at 502-583-6798 and leave a message. Someone will get in touch with you, I'm telling you. Or you can contact me, G. Nelson, at ssclive.org, and I certainly will answer your text. Don't forget, next week we're going to talk about damaged goods. But in the meantime, let us be praying. Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down. See you next week. Be blessed.